All right, what is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here once again, and welcome to the Nebula Music Podcast. As you guys know, this is a show where I talk to some of today's coolest musicians and creative minds of the music industry to try and see what drives their passion and creativity. Today, I'm very excited because I have a very special guest, someone who's incredibly talented, someone whose music that whenever I listen to it, I get very captivated with the intricacy, but also the simplicity behind it all. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but I think it's a type of music that needs to be expertly achieved. And my next guest has definitely gotten to that caliber. I'm very excited to have Mr. Aaron Marshall, aka Intervals, on the show. How are you doing, man? How's everything today?
I'm good, Eddie. Thanks for having me on, dude. I appreciate your time.
Oh man, I appreciate your time. To kind of give you guys a little bit of a backstory of what's going on today, we had some technical difficulties before we started this conversation. We were using Skype, and for whatever reason today, just Skype is deciding not to work for Aaron, for myself. It is the stupidest thing, and sometimes all you got to do is restart your computer and then it works. But I don't know, man. Aaron, it's hilarious how sometimes technology like this it just fucks up your day. You know what I mean? But you know what? We're going to push through it. We're going to have a good time. I'm curious, has that ever happened to you, like live on stage, whenever you're performing, like something just goes off and you can't do shit about it? Has that ever happened to
Oh,
you?
dude, it wouldn't be an interval show if something didn't completely fucking implode.
God,
Um, yeah, that's very common practice for us. In fact, I usually comment when it doesn't because that's a strange occurrence. So it's probably more rare for us to get through unscathed than we're pretty prepared for those scenarios. And I have quite a few stories about some pretty notable ones, but um, today's sort of irony would be that I'm in a room surrounded by equipment, wonderful gear, and now I'm calling you on AirPods because my my setup is working. Skype just decided that it didn't want me to come out and play with all my nice toys today.
I
So
know. It
yeah,
has a
but that's
mind of its
okay.
own. I know. It's okay.
It's it's okay. We're gonna make it work. The conversation is what matters. So and maybe you guys can make me sound nice and glossy in post, but it's all good. So as far as like things going wrong on stage or at shows, I mean, there's certainly a ton. Notable would be 2017. We flew all the way to South Africa for a festival. We were co-headlining with Memphis Mayfire.
Nice.
It's a festival called Cranked Up that happens in Johannesburg every year, and or years when live music is allowed to exist. And we were playing just before Memphis, so we were on, and then they were finishing up the festival, and we're the two international acts that had flown all the way over there to do the show, and we had a wonderful week there. They flew us out like basically a week early so we could acclimate and shake off the jet lag. And I think they like to take time with artists, international artists, to like show them around and everything. So we did like
That's
a
cool.
monkey sanctuary, and we did like a lion and rhino park, and we like fed giraffes and like did all this crazy stuff. And we
That's
stayed in this
sick.
really awesome guest house and everything. So we had this whole week. Weather was beautiful. And of course, like maybe about 30 minutes before we're supposed to take the stage, some sketchy weather activity looked like it was on the horizon.
Ooh.
And of course, we're outside, so there's like 4 or 5 thousand people in a field, and great day for it all day long. And then here comes the weather. So, long story short, we had to wait it out, and they like had to bring in some sort of professionals to like advise on whether or not we could continue because rain had moved in, there was thunder and lightning. I think that for outdoor events, I think it's pretty universal practice to like take a stopwatch, and it's like you need like 10 or 15 minutes between lightning strikes or something
Yeah.
before you can consider whether or not you can do it again.
Yeah.
So we're waiting in a tent side stage, like we were literally just about to change over and take the stage, and the Memphis Mayfire guys were playing Africa by Toto. I can't even
Ha.
make that up. Uh,
I love
so I'm
that.
sitting there listening to that play, which is kind of bittersweet, of course, because what a great moment to be sitting in the rain in Africa. But we had flown all the way over there, and we literally might not be able to play the show. And of course, there was a noise curfew as well. So um, the clouds part, the weather, clears up a little bit. They like mocked the stage and like dried it as much as they could. We got on stage, the crowd was so excited. We were literally thinking about taking over like this like indoor like concession area where they had food and stuff. And then the fire marshal was freaking out, going, "There's like 4,000 people out here. If everyone tries to run inside,
Shit, dude.
that's gonna be a problem because people are going to rush that little area if you try to do it." Because my tour manager and front of house guy was like, "I mean, we didn't fly all the way to Africa to not play, so we're gonna go punk rock on it if we have to." And they were not into that, so we waited, got on stage. I get the show started. We're good to go. Second song, Nathan steps right through the batter head of his kick drum.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, dude. So we had to fly in Memphis Mayfire's kick drum real quick, like just do some kick surgery really fast. I'm sure Jacob played the Seinfeld theme on bass. We killed some time with some poor humor.
Wow.
And we were back at it, and we had a great set, and it was all good. But that's a notable one for sure. One more before we move on, I guess, would be like the Rave in Milwaukee, which is like it used to be called it's still called the Eagles Club, I guess, but it was like, back in the day, it was a place where I think people with the kind of people that would have like coattails and top hats and monocles would like go watch like boxing and like, have like big like balls, like, dancing in the like,
Yeah.
in the big ballroom and everything like that. Who knows what year that would be? There's photos all over the venue. It's a legendary spot in Milwaukee, and it's right across the road from the Ambassador Hotel, which is the one that's of Jeffrey Dahmer fame, if anyone is up on their crazy serial killers. So the entire situation is haunted, is what I'm trying to say. And there's a really creepy abandoned swimming pool in the basement. And whenever you go there for your first time, any bands on the tour package that have already played are always like, "Oh, we got to show you this spot." So we went downstairs and we checked out the creepy swimming pool, and there's like a chair in the boiler room you're absolutely not supposed to touch. And we were in there messing around. I believe my first time there was with Misery Signals, and Carl from Misery Signals took us up into like the attic, and we were just in all the places we weren't supposed to be. And I made a joke on stage at the show about, I'm pretty sure I told the crowd to say 1, 2, 3, fuck ghosts, and all the power went out. I can't even
fucking way. Holy shit.
I can't make it up. So I tried it again, and then the next time we got to another haunted venue, it was at a place called Mr. Smalls in just outside Pittsburgh, and it's like an old converted church. And I ran the same shtick on stage, and my wireless died, and then all the power died on stage.
God damn, dude. Do you?
Yeah.
I'm just randomly curious. Are you superstitious at all? Do you believe in that shit?
I mean, not like actively. It's not something I'm always like thinking about or whatever. I'm not fixating on it, but like when things like that happen, especially considering the first time I was convinced it was a coincidence, and then I tried my luck again and the same thing happened. I don't know that you can make that up.
Yeah, because I've had experiences when I've played at venues or whatever, where there is a sort of trying to be respectful of this place. That's, at least for the people that I've played with, that's kind of always been the consensus. But I always hear stories like yours, and I feel vibes whenever I'm around people like, hey, there's a history in this place. You don't want to rock with that history. And whenever you hear stories of people that were like, oh, you know what, like, screw this history, something random happens. And that always just boggles my mind. Like, could it just be karma? Could it just be like some random ass spirit? I don't know. It's fucking insane.
It was probably a house guy with his hand on the breaker,
Probably.
to be honest.
That's probably true.
But no, it's happened a couple of times. I mean, those are the haunted gear gremlin stories. And other than that, we've had all the usuals happen, like everything that can go wrong on stage will go wrong, but we always play through it and pull it off. We've had laptops die. We've had, if you can imagine it, it's definitely happened, but we've never let it ruin a show. Actually, I even gashed my finger open probably 40 minutes before a show.
Oh shit.
It was 2016, summer 2016, and it was Animals as Leaders, Intervals, and Plenty, and we were doing like 7 weeks in mainland Europe over the course of that summer, and we were in the northeasternmost part of Italy on the border of Slovenia. And we had like an outdoor show. It was really strange. It was in like a town square, like one of these rickety sort of like metal sound stages that's just been erected in like a piazza, like a little public area, like town square outside a church.
Yeah.
And, just like you standard Europe scenario. And catering was outside, and I hadn't eaten in a while, and I was like, oh, I should really eat something. So we were also waiting some rain out for sound check. I went into the catering area and I'm talking to Tosin from Animals as Leaders,
Right.
and we're just having a conversation. And I've got a roll like bread in my hand, and I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing, and I just cut my finger really badly, like really,
What?
really badly. Yeah, yeah, because we were having a conversation, and I was just being an idiot, and I wasn't looking what I was doing. I thought that I was like ready to just cut this thing in half, and instead it was my finger that, yeah, oh yeah,
Oof.
yes. So
Oof.
wound up in a hospital, an Italian hospital, like literally under an hour before I'm supposed to take the stage. Also, if anyone knows about that tour, Plenty and I were playing for each other. So his band is on first, so he does his act first, 8 or 9 songs, and then I go on and he plays second guitar for me. We switch roles. The rhythm section stays the same. So we were the same band twice on that tour. We would just play his material first, and then we would play intervals material second. And we've got about 18 songs to play, and I'm literally in the hospital getting my finger glued together.
Wow. Holy
And
shit.
oh yeah, yeah. So they wanted to stitch me up, but I explained to them that I'm going to rip stitches open the minute I get on stage, so you have to glue it. So they glued my finger shut and put a bandage on it. And then we knew that wasn't going to be enough to get through the show. So we put glue. Animals as Leaders guitar tech Keaton put glue on the outside of the bandage, let it
Oh,
harden, and then sanded it smooth. So he like built me like a thimble.
wow.
Because it's my
Whoa.
first finger, and it's instrumental guitar music. So like it's like that's your like number one point of reference for your left hand, and I do so much like single string like sliding and like a lot of like really particular articulation with that finger. I mean, with any finger on any of your hands when you're a musician, it's not going to be a good time. But yeah, the long and short of that scenario is I'm like going shot for shot with Javier from Animals as Leaders, standing at the tech bench while I'm having my hand glued and like dry sanded into a thimble.
God damn.
And I took the stage with Plenty, very painfully made it through his set. The crowd knew what was going on because we obviously explained that I had just like ran in from the hospital. There's a lot going on as well. My girlfriend at the time had flown in from Greece. She was over there with a friend. And like the plan was she was jumping in the bus for like 4 or 5 days, and then she was heading home, and then I'd meet her back there in a few weeks. And like right as she gets there, this happens, and I've
God
got
damn.
like a wound in my finger, and it lasted about 10 days. I can't believe I actually healed it in 10 days. I remember the first show was like Hamburg, Germany, like 10 days later, and I was able to take the bandage off. But there's evidence of this. We played Brutal Assault Festival in the Czech Republic that summer, and Plenty set was earlier in the day, and there was like the big double jumbotron scenario next to the stage when we did his set, and somebody's filmed this moment in Plenty's set. If you guys aren't familiar with Plenty's music, like it can be a little bit soft at times, and
Yeah. Very emotional
brutal
too.
Brutal Assault is probably one of the weirdest places for us to have played a Plenty show. So there was like illegible tree branch death metal t-shirts doing like a wall of ballet in the crowd because like it was a very soft moment, and I think people were just enjoying the novelty of that. But somebody zoomed in on the jumbotron because like I'm literally crying with laughter at how funny that is. We're on stage playing like ambient trippy clean guitars, and there's like metalheads like pirouetting into each other in the mud,
That's
and
awesome.
I'm laughing so hard, but the can it's so perfect the way like you can just see my bloody first finger like
Ah.
in that video. You can see how shot but I'm playing through it. It's totally fine. And then we had to play later. Interval show was much later that day on a different stage, and we were playing with like Leprous and Tesseract and all these bands. And like at that point, I probably just medicated a little and got through it.
That's what you
But
gotta do sometimes, man. That's what you gotta
some
do.
I don't condone that behavior, but sometimes, and I don't really do that much anymore. But sometimes you got to do that. And then there's the last time that was commemorated was we were in Vienna, and Plenty explained what had happened to the crowd, and he had everybody in the crowd. So it's like a 600 cap room. Everyone's got their first finger in the air, and I'm holding a heart up with both my hands. And that photo was commemorated forever. So anyway,
That's
that's enough
cool.
about my bloody finger, but I've still got scar tissue there, and I feel it every once in a while. It reminds me of how freaking crazy that whole thing was.
Dude, that's insane though. Like I love that you just toughed right through it. You did what you had to do and you had to figure it out. You know what it reminds me of? Have you ever seen the John Wick movie or the trilogy or whatever?
No, actually.
Okay, so there's this scene in John Wick. So to give you some background, he's an assassin, right? And so
Okay.
he that's his job. He kills people, blah blah blah. So at some point in the first movie, he's sitting in this hotel room. He's all like banged up because he just came back from a mission or something. And the doctor, the in-house doctor, he knows that he's an assassin, so he's like stitching him up. And like it's supposed to be like a funny kind of solemn moment where the doctor looks at him and it's just like, "Are you gonna keep working again?" And he's just like, "Yeah." And then he's just like, all right, well, take these pills. He's like, you're stitched up, but they're going to rip because you got to go back to quote unquote work. But take these pills and you won't feel the pain. And then the next scene is John Wick just, tearing it up, killing more people. But
Yeah.
you never see his stitches ever break, but I think it's assumed that they do. And that's kind of reminds me of people like you, because this story it's interesting, but I feel like there's so many other amazing musicians like you who go through the same thing where they're injured and they have to just fucking play and just get through the fucking thing. I don't know. Did you feel adrenaline? Like if it ever broke and you started bleeding again, did you just feel like adrenaline that got you through it?
I mean, I was really doing my best to baby it because it is my first finger, and I am a guitar player's guitar player. You know what I mean? It's not like I just slam power chords in any old band. So it's really important to me that that thing healed properly. But you'll appreciate this part. There's no chance I could have ever sat a show out for a couple of reasons. Number one being Europe tours are extremely expensive, and that tour was budgeted so airtight to where all of my guarantees were already rolled into the bottom line for the settlement every single day. So I wasn't collecting guarantees in cash. They were going literally to Animals as Leaders tour manager to pay for my bus bill. So
Mm.
every show I would have sat out if I had to have done that would literally be my guarantee every single night out of the company's bank account or out of my pocket. Who knows where we were at financially at the time. I literally couldn't have afforded to do it. That would have been every single show would have cost, and intervals is worth a good bit in Europe, so you can imagine what that would cost.
Yeah. Holy shit, dude.
So that wouldn't be good. And the other thing as well was Animals as Leaders were slated to play Heavy Montreal in the middle of a Europe tour.
Oh,
So
really?
they had to fly out from that show the night it happened. They were literally getting ready to board a flight to fly to Montreal and go like round trip, like 48 hours, literally touchdown in Montreal, play a festival, turn around and fly back to meet us in Vienna at that show I was just talking about with the photo where our fingers are all in the air. And it was one of the craziest logistical scenarios I've ever witnessed. And the reason it happened was I think there was like some sort of change in management or something very early before the Europe tour was put together. So once they confirmed the Europe tour, and then all of a sudden the festival coordinator for Heavy Montreal had reached out and been like, "Oh, here's your assets and you're this and you're that for Heavy MTL." And they're like, "We're in Europe at that time. Who confirmed this?" And they're like, "Oh, your previous manager," or like whatever the situation was. So they were like committed to playing a festival in Montreal when they were literally in the middle of a Europe tour.
Wow.
So the reason I'm sharing this is because when they flew out to go to play the festival in Montreal, I have to headline for a couple of shows. So
Oh shit.
not only am I on the hook for those shows, and I have to do them, um, they're worth more because I'm playing
You're
higher up the
headlining.
bill.
Yeah, you're headlining.
So so it was like even more expensive just to add insult to injury, literally. So it was like
Wow.
there's no escaping that. We did the shows with an Italian band called Distrage, who were really sick, and they played over us one night actually, but there was a show where we had to close. So it was like it was a disaster. But I healed it quick and I got over it, and it's just a story to tell at this point now. And I always get clowned for like using a knife at catering, or if I'm ever in an area with like my crew or my band, like sometimes like my tour manager or somebody who's privy to the situation will run over and take the knife out of my hand and cut my bread for me, which I completely appreciate. Like if you want to make my sandwich, like I'm totally down. but it's a running joke for sure. I can't believe that it was something that I had to stomach. Like, of course, having to keep it clean too, and I have to touch a guitar every day with this thing. It was just
Yeah.
it was crazy.
How did you
It
keep it
was out.
clean, by the way? Like, did you have to rub alcohol every fucking day on it or what?
Yeah, they gave me stuff that like I had a little routine to keep it clean, and like I remember like running out of bandages and like having to find like an apothecary somewhere in Vienna and like get myself stuff to get through shows, and it was gross. Like the thing was healing, and every single day I'm putting insane amounts of pressure. And not only that, like I'm sliding, and like you use more than just the front of your finger playing guitar. Like
Right.
you use the side of your finger. Like you use the whole finger. And because there's, so much nuance and like the various techniques that I require, I'm just the worst candidate for having to heal a wound because I'm all over it. It was really bad.
Yeah.
But anyway, I love how this podcast just digressed into my injury.
You know what
That's
though?
good.
Those are the interesting aspects, the little nuances of tours that you never get a chance to hear about. It's why I'm happy to entertain it, because injuries on tour, dude, those are no fucking joke. Like I remember when I
No.
sprained my ankle, dude, and I had to play a couple shows, and
Yeah, and you're a drummer, right?
exactly. So what I had to do was I had to I had to borrow friends. Those like they're like bass drums, but they're meant to be on stands, right?
Yeah.
So I had to
Hmm.
basically play with one of those with my right hand and kind of figure out this interesting way to play the kick with my right hand, but still manage to keep the
Wow.
hi hat going. It was this interesting thing I had to do for like 2-3 weeks. Because it took about like 3 weeks for it to
Wow.
heal. Yeah, but it's
You
interesting.
literally, that's crazy. So you got a gong drum, basically.
Exactly, exactly. And you know what? To be honest, since then, this was what, like maybe 6-7 years ago, something like that.
Yep.
Since then, I have to say that experience kind of changed the way I play forever, because now I'm healed, right? But I find myself using that little technique that I taught myself for 3 weeks more often than ever before. Like I tend to be more musical, so to speak, with the drums, as opposed to just thinking of it like right hand hi hat, left hand snare, right foot kick. That whole experience taught me to open up my body a little bit, and I can use my right hand a little more freely now, which is interesting. It's like a weird detour that my body took because of this injury, and now I play differently in a much more interesting way, I guess you can say. Did that ever happen to you in a weird way, like because of your finger? Did you just heal and now it's back to normal, or do you find yourself like playing slightly different because of that experience?
Um, it wouldn't have changed anything on my end. There's only one way you can do certain things with the guitar. I am all for adapting, and I've had to, adapt certain things on the fly depending on certain scenarios. But that wasn't one. It was just like when it's your first finger, man. I mean,
Dude,
come on. What are we talking about here? Like, there's only one way to do certain things. There's no way you're taking it out of the mix.
yeah,
So, because it's literally your reference point for so much. I mean, your grip on the neck comes from first finger and thumb.
yeah,
That's the very basis of everything that's going to happen. You can't remove it from the mix. So, um, but it's interesting though, because I think about my drummer Nathan often with these types of situations. Like if a kick pedal goes out or something, and we need to continue getting through the song, he is subbing his left hand in over on that, crossing over and hitting the floor tom, or
yep,
or opening his stance up a little bit so that it's right hand floor tom and the left hand is keeping time with hi hat or playing cymbal accents, doing whatever it needs to do. I've seen it happen. Or he'll actually just switch over to trying to do as much as possible with the left kick only on the double pedal. And these things happen, especially with drummers. Kit's always falling apart.
I
There's always
know.
so much
You can have the
weird
best, you can have the
shit. Yeah.
best kick. I mean, the best kit that is available, and
Yeah.
you'll still have
Uh-huh.
something fall. It's weird.
Oh, 100%. If there's nobody like, if you're stage manager or there isn't somebody else like watching for like the china that's about to fall off the riser or like various scenarios, then you're just kind of screwed sometimes. The drummer has to continue playing. So, um, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely challenging. We've been through a lot of the situations. I have a ton of respect for the drummers out there who have to go through all that stuff, because it's one thing when a guitar goes out and it's like, a piece of equipment is causing the issue. I mean, it sucks. It's not pleasant, but with the drum scenario, it's like if something's going wrong back there, whoo, there's a lot of tension happening. So,
Yep. Yep. I always tell that to people. It's one of those things where you only really understand if you're like in a band or if you are a
yeah,
musician
you'll
yourself.
never know.
You'll
Yeah.
never know. You'll never know. And that's why these conversations are beautiful, because it kind of opens up to that idea and allowing people to understand kind of what your life is like. I'm curious, do you play drums at it, but like a little bit? Do you know a little bit about how to like move around the kit, or are you strictly just guitar and like bass?
I play drums a lot of it. Actually,
Really?
it's actually the instrument I wanted to play before guitar. I just managed to get my hands on a guitar when I was younger first. I think it was just more of a reasonable instrument to bring into the house and get me started musically. Big, awkward acoustic guitar that I could barely get my arm over. But that's where I started. I wanted a kit though, and I did, a few years down the line, wind up with a beater kit in the house. And I was always from a young age fascinated with drums and still am. I actually think that if I wasn't playing guitar in a band, I would be drumming because I think the drummers have the most fun back there. I mean, we're talking about how much responsibility is there, so it's definitely a crazy role. But when I watch a band live, more often than not, especially on tour when you're going to see a band like 30 nights in a row, I'm side stage watching the drummer.
We're fun to watch.
Always, and even from the crowd, I'm the most interested in what's going on back there. Like we always laugh about, especially considering how many shows we've done with Animals as Leaders. In 2016, we did Europe for 7 weeks and then North America for 6 weeks later on in the year. We probably did like nearly 80 shows together or something, and just watch Garska every single night. Just watch Matt because
he's insane, dude. He's on a
and it's
different
funny
level.
because he's on a completely different level. The man is not human. But it's funny because it's a guitar driven band, and it's what a lot of people I think gravitate towards Animals as Leaders for. And trust me, Tosin and Javier are legends. I love everything that's going on there. I'm fascinated by that as well. And we're exchanging ideas in the green room and hanging out daily and talking about guitar all the time and everything. I've picked a ton up off Tosin. Like, and my approach to harmony and a lot of like the way I hear things changed from just literally spending an entire year on tour with them. But no, I'm watching the drummer always, and I'm fascinated by drummers. I think that all my favorite composers and guitar players all share in common this passion for drums. Funny
Mm.
enough, it's like we could all talk about guitar, of course, but I think that the most prominent composers, especially in the microcosm that I exist in, to be a competent composer from the perspective of guitar and write music that's inclusive of all instruments in the composition and not just a backing track featuring your guitar on top, you need to understand the relationship of rhythm to be able to write expansive compositions that are full of variation and being able to vary the feel, play with dynamics and stuff. Understanding that is crucial. So when I compose, I'm obviously using program drums to do so. But what's going on in my head and how I would approach it at the kit personally is very similar to how Nathan would actually play, because Nathan and I are very much on the same page with what we like about drums, and I compose with his style and energy in mind. So
Mm.
I know what's possible from a program drum standpoint. I'm not the guy who's got left foot hi-hat checking while there's double kicks going and then there's 3 crash cymbals on the downbeat. Like that, I understand how the kit functions. So my program drums are meticulous. In fact, you could sit there and read it off a chart and you would be able to literally play everything, because I don't ever compose anything that your hands and feet would never be able to do.
Mm. That's pretty
So
fucking cool, dude. Like, here's the cool part. I love that you understand the little nuances when it comes to playing drums, when it comes to composing drums. I'm wondering, and I feel like I know the answer, but I'm wondering why you feel like understanding drums is really a key factor of being a great composer. Because I agree. I definitely agree. I think that not even just in the genre that you exist in, but I think across the board, when you study even old composers from other generations many, many years ago, you'll find that there is this sort of similarity, that it isn't just about the melody, that there's this deep understanding of the whole rhythm and how that functions along with harmony. You're definitely right on that. So I'm curious for you, why do you feel, and like, how did it become so important to you, and how do you know that rhythm is important when it comes to composing? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean it's a big
It's
concept,
a
but
broad question too. I'm sorry.
I'll try to. No, of course, I love it though. I'm going to try to put it as concisely as possible. Here's the thing about playing any melodic instrument and not having time. Nobody wants to hear that. So that I don't care how sweet your harmony, how expensive your harmony is, or how cool, you can make a certain, phrase or a line sound or whatever. Notes are just hanging in space and time if they aren't, if there's no, basically you have the what and you have the why. Rhythm is why, and you can have what for days, but if you don't have why with conviction, then,
I've never heard someone explaining it like that. That's beautiful. The what and the why.
it's the what and the why, 100%. I mean, I can't take credit for that. That's Victor Wooten.
Oh, of course, of course, of course.
You're
Victor
right.
Wooten would say that.
And who has better what and why, and when, you know what I mean?
That's true.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is that, you can play. There's so many ways to give the listener to this podcast like an example of why that makes sense. So in music in general, and we talk about this often in guitar. I know Joe Satriani has his, I believe he calls it the 11 notes of bullshit rule. Joe, also Victor talks about this as well. You can essentially play anything with conviction if your pocket and your time is correct. You can sell any idea. Like I could sell gloves to the handless man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I believe, if I believe in the snake oil, like if you see it and read it and feel it off me, there's no reason that resolving on the one with something super in when I've come from something super out, I'm just pulling a fast one on you. You can't fact check me until playback, but in the moment you believed me. So
Wow.
that's the thing, right? Is like, that's the what and the why. So if I fumble a crappy idea, like if I'm bold-faced lying to you, but I'm staring at my shoes, you can feel it in my pocket.
Right.
You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
if I pitch it to you with the utmost of conviction and then resolve in on one, you will eat it. You'll buy a hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
So that's why timing is so important, because you can't even mess with nuanced ideas outside of what's just inside and sweet and believable, kind of the thing that you could put on like background music and study.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, this all checks out. Nothing's, there's no alarm bells going off.
Yeah.
But if I try to slide something under the door and I do it in a really crappy way, that's like a game of Operation. If I hit the side and it goes, then it's like, you know what I mean?
Game over
I have
at that
to do
point.
it. Yeah, exactly. So your timing has to be, and that's like a pretty like cerebral example. In a more like, let me reframe that. That's more of like a micro example. In a more macro sort of vantage, I think that it's important because pocket and timing define the feel like more than Like, okay, sure, you can have a beautiful chord progression and it can be filled with all this lovely harmony. But if we haven't set a tempo and a pocket and a feel, then there's no way to assign where the chords fall. What beat in the bar do they happen? What's the pattern? And what's happening on top of that as well. You can have all these beautiful notes that are sort of part of the recipe for a wonderful melody, but if you don't have any feel or soul and you're just reciting notes, then nobody's trying to listen to that. So I mean,
Yeah.
I know that I'm not, and this is why even as an instrumental guitar player, a lot of the time we get looped in and sort of lumped in with like this like virtuosic nature, and it's like, oh, these guys are savants and everything like that. And trust me, there's a lot of guys in my world that play Olympic level guitar.
Right.
I've never seen it as a sport. I immediately lose my interest in it when all of a sudden there's like this goal for for tempo and speed and all these types of things. My favorite players are people who just their playing contains like a world of vibe and emotion,
Yeah.
even with just like four notes, but it's where you place them, what beats in the bar, how you articulate, and then of course, yes, what notes you're choosing. Yeah, we can get into that too. And that part is extremely subjective, but your personality comes from your vibe and your feel. So that's your why. And we can all have what is your content. That's, my what is different than your what, but the why is what really defines how, we come across as musicians. So
Wow. I got to say, man, before I even continue, you are an incredibly well-spoken individual, incredibly intelligent. I can tell right off the back. And I love hearing you explain concepts because it's explained in a detailed yet simple way. And I feel like that's really, really hard to do. So kudos to you. And by the way, for everyone listening, in case you were wondering, Victor Wooten is a legendary bassist. If you haven't heard of him, you definitely should check him out. He's absolutely incredible. One of the best, I would argue, that exists in our generation.
He's amazing, man. And thank you for the compliment. I really appreciate that. The thing is around the time, it's a funny segue there, because around the time that I would have discovered Victor would be around the time that I was making ends meet, transitioning from working in music retail and just sort of patching in the gray area between that and my touring career. And teaching was extremely important. So I had actually hosted a clinic for Victor at a music store, and I was reading his book at the time, and teaching was something that I'm still extremely passionate about, which is why I try to find simple yet detailed ways of explaining things, because all my favorite teachers do this, and I think that that's how you need to speak to somebody to allow them to understand. And obviously in the context of a podcast, I don't know exactly who I'm talking to. There's a broad listener base here, so I'm going to do my absolute best to frame things in a way that everybody can take something from. But when it comes to that time period for me, I got to be more than a fly on the wall at a Victor clinic. And Victor talks about so many unbelievable things that just blow the top off your skull when it comes to, how you think about music, and it makes you reevaluate everything. One of the biggest things, and this was the sort of the topic that brought us to that very point that I was just talking about, was he says, what's the scale as musicians that we practice the least? And before I give the answer, what do you think it is?
The scale that we practice the least.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I'm gonna take a shot in the dark. I have no idea, but I'm gonna have to say either. I'm stuck between harmonic or melodic minor, but I'm gonna go with melodic minor.
So your brain takes you to somewhere where you're like, yeah, what's one of those weird things I learned in music class where I don't usually use it, but it's totally functional. It's funny that and a lot of people had so many different answers. The answer is chromatic.
Oh, yeah, completely.
The answer is chromatic, because it's all 12 pitches, right? And a lot of times when we think about scales, we just think about dividing the octave into the 7 notes that we need to use and discarding the rest, right?
Right.
So he mentions chromatic, and that was his segue into being like, watch how much bullshit I can cram into a bar with pocket and conviction, as long as I resolve on a significant beat in the next bar. So I can sell you Snake Oil and resolve sweet, with either the tonic on the downbeat, and then everything feels like, oh, it just resolved. Everything came back. Or you could, strategically choose another chord tone depending on maybe where the progression's headed or something like that. But over a 1-chord vamp, you can just pretty much scribble on the page as long as you come back to the starting point. Yeah. And as long as the entire thing just fits into this way that just like embodies the feel, right? Because what are we doing? Like, if we just have a metronome going with a 1-chord vamp, like, you're implying the feel. So is there pocket? Are you imagining a backbeat? Is the snare on 2 and 4? Is it swung? So you can play with so many different things and how you group all of those notes, as long as you resolve correctly. So if the next downbeat comes around once the phrase is over, and you just phone it in and land on some random note, well, the whole idea might just disappear into a puff of smoke, or everyone in the room might just, their skin might crawl.
Yeah.
But if you sell it correctly and you stick the landing, then time just keeps moving, and everyone's just so impressed with everything that you have to say, and they're just looking at you, your body language, how you're playing, the ideas that are coming out of your hands. It's like, wow, like, this is, you're just along for the ride. You're not concerned with, and then also he also talks about how to gracefully make mistakes and how to accept your mistakes. So one of his biggest, I love that I'm just reciting Victor Wooten stuff on your podcast. one of his biggest techniques for for sort of gracefully playing a mistake when you are improvising is the first thing is to not wear it on your sleeve. So you don't just act like the world just ended and all of a sudden your feel falls apart. Your next ideas are all just crumbling, because that's when the room feels the tension coming off of you. And then they get that secondhand embarrassment, and it's not just in music. This is just public speaking, if you stutter or if you mix a word up or say something wrong, if you keep it moving, nobody has time
To
to
even
dwell.
notice.
But
Yeah.
if you make a big deal out of it, then everyone's going to feel it and you're going to continue reliving the nightmare. So one of his devices for gracefully making a mistake is to repeat your mistakes. So
Hmm.
that's really interesting. So if you played a mistake but you maintained your pocket, you still have a why. The what might not be perfect, but the why is still there. It still fits into this skeleton, this form. It has like a body. It has like there's like, the timing gives it structure. So if you continue playing, let's say so you make a mistake and then you keep playing and then the next time that very beat in the bar comes up, you play the same mistake again. Now it's just a phrase. Now you're just playing with it.
Yeah. Now it's intentional.
Now it's intentional, but like it's something that like you were like, ooh, that wasn't supposed to happen, but let's just try it again. Like, oh, let's just try
Interesting.
it again. And then once you play around with that a little bit, obviously this is arbitrary because we're just talking. I don't have an instrument in my hands. I could definitely do this, but I'm going to do my best to describe it. So if you play the mistake again, and then let's say you play it again, and then you play it again, and the timing still feels right, and then you just tweak that one thing about it that was wrong, but you continue holding the time. It's like you really just kind of used it as a device to kind of just play some new idea off of, and like there's that cliche that like jazz is just there's no wrong parts, there's only
Yeah.
new parts,
Yeah.
no wrong notes, only new parts, right? So like it all just depends on your temperament for those types of things and how thick your skin is or like how much you have a stomach for being able to gracefully take it on the chin and then turn around and then land a roundhouse kick. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that reminds me of my an old mentor I had, Gary Fukushima, fantastic jazz pianist. And there was a time
Sick.
where I asked him like this is around the time where I was learning about like fourth chords and trying to figure out voicings because I'm a pianist too. And
Nice.
he reminds me of Victor Wooten in that sense because at this one specific day he sits at the piano and he's like, all right, so here's a jazz chord, and he just plays all the notes. Like he just literally just like for an entire octave, he plays all 12 notes. He's just like that's a jazz
Mm,
chord. And then he like goes to the next octave and he just starts playing random notes. And then, at first I thought obviously he's trying to prove a point and kind of being that here I can play whatever I want. But then when he took time to think about it, he brought me over to the piano. He's like, all right, what am I playing here? And I'm looking at it, it's like, oh, that's looks like nonsense. Like, yeah, it is nonsense, but think about it again. And he like removes one finger and all of a sudden it's like a C minor 13th chord, right? And I was like, oh shit. And so he was trying to get me to realize that every single note chromatically is technically correct once you phrase it the right way or once you think
yes.
about it the right way. And that kind of blew my mind
Yes.
that day. I was young back then, but it's a very similar concept that technically all the
This
notes
is
are correct.
this is the same concept exactly. And the thing is that Western music has just sort of conditioned the listener to being so used to do re mi fa sol la ti do that even for like the average individual who doesn't understand really anything to do with what we're talking about, they know the major scale. And if you're at a house party or you're at a campfire, somebody picks up an acoustic guitar and they play a wrong note, everyone can feel it. Even the
Yeah.
average person who doesn't know anything about music, they can feel that tension, the distance between the tonic and whatever note they played incorrectly or didn't mean to play felt wrong. So Victor does the same thing. He takes his loop pedal, he just plays a single note, probably just a C, just to keep things nice and simple, just drones that note out, and then he plays each individual note stepping away from, first he started with the major scale. We're comfortable with every single degree as we're moving further and further from the tonic. And then he plays, I don't know, it's probably flat five or something like that, which we've all heard before. And even in pop music, you hear a flat five in
You
vocals
do.
often,
Yeah.
in the blues runs and things like that. And it's an acceptable note. But when you stand on flat five, so if we're droning a C, if you stand on F sharp, it's not going to feel so
It's
good.
not.
The thing is though, perspective, because all the listener needs to do is become comfortable. You just need to show them that it is okay to feel that note. So where would be for the music nerds, like if I'm playing F sharp against C, like where's the most acceptable place to make that feel inside? C Lydian would be, so that's a mode of the G major scale. So all of a sudden, oh, actually, wow, F sharp against C is not as jarring. All I need is perspective. So you just have to
Mm.
show the listener that it's okay to feel that tension because it serves its place in the bigger picture. And that again just brings us back to this whole concept of resolution. So you perform these things with conviction, and then you bring the listener back and settle them gently down on the ground unharmed, and they're none the wiser. It's like a hit, as sort of like the way somebody like might hypnotize an individual, or you might just pull the dinner cloth out from under all the dishes. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? That little trick, you never see it coming, and you might not even, if you blink fast enough, you might not ever know it even happened. So yeah, basically, all that is to say that musicians are magicians.
Yeah, and that is absolutely true. And by the way, taking a quick little sidestep here for all of you guys who might be trying your best to keep up with the music theory here, Aaron was just mentioning modes, which are scale modes, which if you look at every single note in a scale, if you know, like C major, for example, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, each of those notes, when played in consecutive order according to that scale, has a mode that you can use in specific situations. And that's what Aaron was talking about there for a second, is using F sharp, even though again, C, it sounds like a wrong note, can be uncomfortable when used in context of G. It makes sense, and you can kind of play around with that until you find your way back to C, is essentially the concept that Aaron was talking about, if I got that correctly.
Exactly. Yeah. And cataloging different emotions by modes, or cataloging, I should probably say it the other way around. So cataloging modes by their emotion. Um, One of the things for me was like learning when I was, really hungry for understanding theory, was one of the things that made it the easiest for me was understanding that a lot of my favorite musicians have sounds that they're drawn to, and I was always confused of like, why do they sound so different when they play all the same notes that I'm playing, but why is there like a different emotional quality, or they're achieving this like mystical sort of vibe that I'm not able to really get my brain around. And it's all just about perspective. But when you start to associate the various nooks and crannies of the 12 tone octave with these various emotional sort of qualities, and then cataloging them by your favorite artist, then you really start to know, okay, if I want to make the listener feel this, or I want to sound like this is where I go with it. So when I think about Dorian, I think about Carlos Santana. When I think about Lydian, I think about Steve Vai and Devin Townsend and like proggy, spacey, crazy. When I think about Mixolydian, I think about Joe Satriani, you know,
Yeah.
or, like neo modern blues and things like that, or just blues in general. When I think about Phrygian, I think about like Metallica, like Master of Puppets, and
Yeah.
like that those tensions. And if you catalog them that way, then it's really easy to embody those things on the fly, and that's how you become a versatile musician.
Interesting. So you're saying that in order to gain that confidence to be able to play around whichever way you want, is to, at least based on what I'm understanding, because there is like two schools of thought here that I'm kind of picking up on, which I feel like I've picked up on as I grew as a musician. And there is the first school of thought where it's like you kind of got to know everything, where you got to go in there and study and understand the theory and the harmony and how everything works. But another way that you're sort of explaining, and I've also have noticed that other musicians have done it this way indirectly, is that they find ways to associate these musical rules, so to speak, with existing products. So, for example, you just listed like a good 4 or 5 songs, and you understood the feeling and the theme behind those songs, and you understood, okay, this one's in Phrygian mode, that's in Lydian mode. I understand now that I can think of this one song when it comes to that mode. And in the way you're explaining it, if I'm understanding correctly, that's your way of kind of getting confident with that, is kind of finding a way to relate the rules with some stuff that already exists. Is that along the lines of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think both approaches are necessary. Like, I think you need to walk before you run, but I also think that the 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 latter, so like using that sort of association with artists and things like that, various songs or things you've heard before, reverse engineering from a point of reference can also bring you to a stronger foundation as well. I think both things result in the same um, understanding ultimately. They're just two different ways to go about it. You could just be rudimentary and academic and come at it from the book, but there's really no application or process. And I know that, like, I personally always do better when there's something, when I have a frame of reference and it's enticing. So, like, people ask often, like, what's your practice regimen like? Um, for me, I practice the most when I'm recording. Well, why is
Mm.
that? Well, it's because it's more productive for me to hone my craft in the context of recording an idea because it shows me where all of the holes in my game are. So if I'm sitting with the metronome and I'm trying to get rhythm guitars together, um, and it's like a pretty angular line or something extremely rhythmic or something, um, with modern recording, it's great. It's not like I have to stand there with another live musician and really try to like stress over getting it right while they keep rewinding the tape in the control room. It's not
Yeah.
like that anymore. I can loop the metronome, just click it into the grid basically and just sit there. Even without programmed drums or bass or any frame of reference, I know exactly what the phrase is supposed to be. And I sit there and I'll play it multiple times until I'll even look back. I'll stop recording, take a look at the grid and see, oh, I'm a little late here. I'm a little loose here. Or, ooh, when I go for the triplet, I'm a little lazy. So then it's like, okay, regroup, take a second, have a breather, put the metronome back on, and then just like make these micro adjustments. And then all of a sudden, you really start to feel it come together. I might let it continue recording. And then I've collected maybe 5 or 6, like really, usable phrases. And then I'll scrutinize, okay, did I start early on the downbeat? Am I coming in late? Does this have the overall feel? I mean, it's a rabbit hole because especially with like, recording distorted electric guitars, there's so much nuance. Did I have
Yeah.
the pick? Did I have the pick tilted the way I like?
Mm.
Is there a cool articulation on this one? Ooh, maybe the timing's a little loose, but I fucking love the personality of this one. All right, let's fly that in. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you just have to get under the microscope with it, and by virtue of that process, I am practicing. I'm honing my timing. I'm listening and curating my own performance. I'm figuring out how I want to say, what I want to say, how it needs to be said, and then there's some
Yeah.
things where that doesn't work, where of course just clicking it into the void is just not going to work. You have to definitely embody, maybe there's like a little bit of um, nuance or pocket happening with a particular groove in the kick pattern or something, and you really need to fill that out. Well, then that's totally fine. Then you should spend time trying to make that work. But the sign of a quality versatile musician is somebody who can, work these things out on the fly, and it doesn't take them too long to readapt. Um,
Yeah.
and I love that so much. It's one of my favorite things about working with other artists, or even just working with myself. My own nonsense is just having to figure out what needs to happen at any given moment, and that's my practice.
Yeah.
Getting my timing airtight and everything like that. And then when it comes to composing leads and everything, well, then I'm just using my intuition to guide me through what it is that I'm trying to say, and I'll maybe scratch out an entire song's worth of melodic ideas and solos and various things, and then just continue playing it and rehearsing it, and then tear it apart and embellish here. Oh, maybe I said too much there. Let's make that more simple. Oh, I really like what I had to say here. I think it's going to come to life when I harmonize it. I really, this and that. It's like you're a crazy person upstairs, like you're just having this wild dialogue, but that to me is practice. I'm curating my own ideas and not accepting mediocrity and forcing myself to be better than I know that I even can be, because in the past I've proven that those results are achievable, and this is how we overcome things and get better. And it might not happen in that sitting. I mean, forming new neurological connections and making muscle, growing muscle memory and all these types of things come from painstakingly working it through, and it could take as long as a full night's worth of sleep to really ingrain those patterns, or it could actually just take a 30-minute break, get up, stretch your legs, have some water, sit down with a renewed vantage, and then just sit down and deliver, and you're like, wow, okay, yeah, no, it's totally there. And a lot of
Yeah.
this stuff is psychological. It can also be physical too, but you just have to build those connections, and nothing is unattainable,
Yeah.
so
So you don't practice for fun, so to speak, then. And I don't mean that in the sense I feel like most musicians do that, but I guess what you're saying is when you have a goal in mind, whether it's to record or to compose an idea, you sort of use that opportunity to kind of tone, get in there and surgically kind of understand what it is that you're playing, what you're trying to achieve. And then once you get what you achieve, that's kind of like the whole process. You wanted something, you couldn't necessarily play it how you want it, and you worked on it until you got it. That
yes.
sort of like your practice regimen?
Yes, and then it's twofold, because not only did you spend the time, working through something that you need to practice, and you develop that discipline, but then you actually have something to show for it versus 2 hours that have
Right.
just disappeared into the void where you're just sitting with the metronome arbitrarily working through sequences.
Yeah.
Yes, that's going to enhance your improv vocabulary, and there's definitely a time and place for just practice for the sake of practice. But for me, I'm an independent musician. Intervals is my, I live and die by the music, and it's like a means to my end. It's how I make a living. I eat, sleep, and breathe it every single day. So I'm advancing my playing through the mechanism of creating music, which means that I'm getting better, but I'm also making art that puts food on my table. So
Right.
like maybe earlier in high school I would do the arbitrary practice thing, but I still think I always got more out of learning songs and embodying my favorite players and really just picking up on how to deliver an entire song that somebody else has composed. So many times I would just finish learning a song or be able to get that into my repertoire and immediately be inspired to write my own. The wheels are already turning. I'm already running those ideas through my, machine, if you will, and out comes, my take on things. And then I have
Yeah.
my own original compositions and things like that. And back then there was more time for that. Now, of course, it's about, it's not always about productivity. I do play for pleasure. Like I'll
Right.
sit down with an amp and some pedals and just vibe, and like that's a great afternoon for me to just chill out and just do that and like really just fall in love with the sound all over again and have no expectations. Those sessions are extremely healthy. That's like meditation on your guitar. And I think you need that in order to be able to walk across the room and sit in the chair in front of the recording setup and dig back in with the metronome and really kind of, hone those things. But for me, I need to have an outcome. I need to be working towards something. And then when
Yes.
I achieve it, I listen back, drop it in over the drums or, do whatever I need to do, listen back and just go, oh, hell yes. And not only do you feel accomplished that you just physically performed that, you've actually got something to show for it, whether it's pre-production I know that in a couple weeks time I'm going to step into a studio and do this again for real, or just before we jumped on this call, I'm working on a collaborative project that's actually about to drop. I have to turn in the stems in a couple days, and then I think it's going to come out ahead of my record, which we've been promoting for the last like 5 weeks, and the record comes out on November 13th. But this project that I'm just working on now is actually slated to drop ahead of it. And usually for final recordings and stuff, I usually hire an engineer and I go into a studio and I do a traditional recording setup because I always prefer playing and not handling the computer. But I'm currently in the process of writing and recording something that is going to be released and actually mixed by a really big engineer and everything. So I have to bring my A game. So I'm
Yeah.
literally doing that right now as I've written something that's very challenging and I'm under the microscope dissecting it and getting it right so I can feel good about putting my best foot forward for this project and feeling good about my playing and also feeling good about my engineering as well. It's just me sharpening my blade.
Yeah, which I absolutely love, dude. And here's a cool thing of that you brought up a little earlier that I kind of want to explore a little bit, which I find fascinating because your experience, the way that you are, the way that you play, for example, is really, really phenomenal. Like amazingly well. You're on the cusp of being a virtuoso, in my opinion. And you already are, to be honest. But what's interesting about it is that your approach to practice and your approach to actually getting better and making music is slightly different to what I was taught, growing up. And that's one of the things that I've kind of paid attention to when I've met other teachers or have just kind of understood how the whole teaching process functions from a musical teacher's perspective. I find that where I'm at now currently in my career, I'm definitely a lot more like you, where I practice quite a bit, but I always practice with like a certain outcome in mind. Like I either have a performance to do or there is some sort of collaboration or something that I'm working on, and then I work really hard on that specific thing. But I remember when I was growing up or a little bit younger, I was constantly encouraged by those around me, whether it was mentors I had or people that were in my immediate life or whatever. The common consensus that I gathered was you needed to practice for practice sake, technique, all these concepts. And the idea of learning a song was great, but that came later. And so for me, it's always interesting because I don't regret learning the technique at all. I think it's necessary. Like you were saying, we all do it at some point in our life. But I do find that I'm not going to say it's discouraged, but I do find that the way that you do things is not a way that most people advocate for, at least. And let's be honest, I think a lot of your fans are people that would be very interested in finding out how you work on your stuff. I think they'd be very surprised to find out how you do it, and so part of me wonders, is there something to it? Is that like the secret, or I'm not even sure the secret, but it's clearly a way that works for you. It might not work for everybody, but it is interesting.
Exactly.
I can relate to you on that. And so I find it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's incredibly fascinating as well to hear. And like a lot of the time, I often think about like, what would it have been like if my practicing was more regimented? And there certainly was a time in my life where I would, devote the hour and divide it into thirds and say, okay, I'm going to do, this technique for 20 minutes and then move to this and do this and catalog your practice routine. And there's a lot of players in my world that you can tell put in the thousands on thousands of hours to do that, where they're like an encyclopedia where they can just pull these things out of nowhere. The thing for me is I personally, I think it really depends on your personality and how your brain works. I suffer from option paralysis. So if I don't, option paralysis meaning every option is possible at any given moment, so nothing ends up happening.
Gotcha.
because the brain is just like I'm just like buffering. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like
gotcha.
There's gonna be it was like my brain is just is how Skype treated me before this podcast started. So I don't function well that way. I function my best in the confines of limitation. So take everything away from me and only leave me with one string, and I'll make you a song.
Wow, that's pretty fucking cool, dude.
So that's where I'm at, and and of course I'm not doing entire intervals compositions with one string. Don't get that twisted. But I will absolutely use that as the impetus for it's. I mean, one, it's an extremely valid writing device. And you could ask any composer about the concept of limitation, and they'll tell you right then and there all the different things that they've created as a result of limitation. Because when you remove options, you have to ultimately become more creative, because you have to say more with less. So you wind up having to really hone how it is that you're seeing things, thinking. All of a sudden, the way you express particular articulations or how ideas come up become a lot more clear. Because you're cutting through the noise, you're trimming the fat off of everything. So I think that, just to double this back to practicing, option paralysis would be, okay, I have 2 hours to practice. Dead air, right? It's just like, okay, cool. Like that's great. I have 2 hours to practice. What's about to happen here? Versus I've got 2 hours before the podcast with Eddie, and I need to record rhythm guitars for a collaboration that's coming up. All right, good. So let's go. And then that gives me something to work on. So I'm working on a composition right now with a really big metal producer. I've been sent nothing but 4 minutes of drums. Ooh. And I need to compose the entire song. So luckily, the entire structure and the arrangement is there, where this is where I'll spin my wheels the most, is deciding on the flow of a song, overall arrangement. The macro stuff always gets me. That's where I really get hung up a lot of the time, because how much limitation is there, other than being like, okay, this song is going to have pop song structure, or this song is going to have like an A, B, A, C, maybe a little D in there. You know what I mean? It's like that's like the only limitation that you can create, but often intuition and the way the music is flowing is going to dictate that. And sometimes a piece is unorthodox and it's telling you it wants to go somewhere that you're not necessarily prepared to hear yet. So that can leave you in the ether. But sending me 4 minutes of drums and being like, you cannot change the arrangement, you have to write to this. Awesome. Done. I'll hit you back in 48 hours. You know what I mean? Because it's like I'm locked in. It's like I'm going to just do what I do with my instrument, and I'm just going to vibe.
Yeah.
The kick drum patterns are locked in, the flow of the song, the feel changes is all there. And the first thing I do, like I'll walk you through that. First thing I do is I drop that in my session, and then I just catalog every part and lay out markers. So I tell myself, okay, this is the intro and it's the theme, because I see it repeats here and it repeats here. So this is sort of how I'm going to bookend this song. This is for sure going to have repeating moments here. Is verse 1 like verse 2? Are there variations? No, they're the same. Awesome. So I'm going to provide melodic variation because there's no rhythmic variation. So we're going to swing the pendulum that way. So I already know that that's my responsibility. And then, okay, let's take a look at the bridge. Is it just one part? Oh, okay, no, the bridge kind of has two different feels. So bridge A, bridge B. Maybe I'm going to solo on one of these. Question mark? And then work through it, lay out the rhythms, and then it's like, cool, yeah, I know exactly how the song is going to move. Let's take a break, come back, and kind of sing with it a little bit. Sing being like the way I usually play guitar that isn't like obvious guitar playing, like, shit tons of solos and things like that.
Yeah.
Let's actually develop a top line over that theme, and then let's see how that plays into the verses and working with those variations and things. And then it's like, by the time we get to the bridge, my intuition is correct. Yes, this is where I'm going to open up in guns blaze. That's going to be where the solo's at. So I already know like the confines of this structure, limitation is there. And now I can just frolic through a musical wooded glen. Just, you know what I mean? And just bounce around and just use all of the things that are coming to mind within that framework. And it doesn't leave me to overthink anything, and I can just deliver.
It's crazy because I feel like I understand what you're talking about. I have a very similar thing. I've never thought of ever calling it, option paralysis. Is that an actual like medical term?
No, I don't know about medical, but like it's definitely option. There's probably a few other ways to frame that, but it's certainly a mental
I mean, it exists.
framework or state of mind. Oh, it exists. I mean, I think sort of type A OCD perfectionist individuals suffer from this, aka artists. Aka every artist I know.
It's crazy.
It's really strange when you meet a musician who's like, competent songwriter, and you're like, man, how do you just bang out compositions? You look at some guys that write so much music, like Devin Townsend writes a couple albums a year. Buckethead is releasing so much music. Like you look at guys that are just constantly now. Okay, maybe Buckethead's a weird example, not to take anything away, but like I'm not necessarily consuming all of those records and going, wow, every single one of these is like his magnum opus. However, when Devin drops albums, and he drops them often, there's no filler. This guy just sits down and pours out competent arrangements that are just unbelievable. So you look at an individual like him and you're like, well, how have you done that? And it's just, songwriting is a muscle that you have to just continue flexing. And the more you flex it, the more you develop it. And, it's the difference between not ever working out and just going like, yeah, I'll go to the gym with the homie, and then you're just dead afterwards, and then he's just running laps around you, and then he's recovering and back in the gym tomorrow. It's the same thing. You have to be able to just get your mind into a position where you're making decisions quickly. And as far as limitation goes, the other side of the coin is committing and not overthinking. Like print it down. Don't leave it just sitting there like where fix it later or this. No, commit. You commit now, and maybe later in the process you can give yourself the opportunity to sort of reassess some of those things. But you need to commit and continue moving, because you're never going to see the forest for the trees if you just all you're staring at is trees.
Right.
So
holy shit, man. These examples and stuff, you have my mind racing right now. I'm just thinking, I mean, that's what all this is about, because it's true. Like, I can't tell you how many times in producing and stuff where when I first started years ago, it was one of those things where, for me specifically, the amount of sounds that I could use, like especially when it comes to like sound design, for example, I'm not even talking about like drums or instruments, but the amount of libraries that I would have to go through that I had access to. Dude, I would sit there for hours, and I would realize like, oh my God, I just spent 4 hours listening to horns and strings, and I haven't even chosen one. And it can be so limiting, the amount of options that you have in front of you. It's crazy.
And that's the problem, is that these days with modern recording, we've actually been given too many tools.
Yeah. You wouldn't think it would be a problem.
Comes with you wouldn't think so, but you'll get certain, depending on your personality type, you can get caught up in there. You get tangled up in that web, and it's not a productive place to be. So this is what I often recommend for that kind of stuff. And you see it a lot more in electronic music, but I think that this is certainly applicable to rock music, or these days. I mean, look, when you're composing in the digital domain, I think that the process is similar regardless of whether or not you're sitting with a guitar in your hands or you're doing it all MIDI driven or whatever. At the end of the day, we're all doing relatively similar things. I think that taking the time, and this should be relieving to people that are listening to this podcast who compose music and are maybe looking for different ways to work. I think that you need to, first of all, you can never force yourself to compose. You have to be in the mood to compose. So
Right.
don't ever say it's Tuesday, I'm writing a song. No, that's not. You're not writing a song. It's Tuesday, and that's all that you know. But I can tell you right now, you're not writing a song if you just told yourself you're about to write a song. Now, maybe if you're really dialed in, you're extremely practiced. You're well versed in some of the concepts that we're discussing here. Perhaps these are the things that you do end up. You are able to just like say, okay, yeah, I'm going to sit down and compose. But there is definitely that like red light syndrome, sort of, when the recording light is on, it's like, all of
Yeah.
your creativity falls by the
Yep.
wayside, or perhaps you're just frustrated by the fact that you're not actually composing anything competent. So you
Happens
can't force
all the
yourself.
time, man. It happens all the
All the
fucking
time.
time.
You need to be in the mood for it. So that's number one. But here's what you need to do. You need tools to build a house, right? So why are we cataloging tools and deciding which hammer we like the feel of the handle the most? And I like this saw, and the blade on my X-Acto knife is a little dull. Maybe I'll change that out. And you know what? Never really liked this screwdriver. I wonder if I could go to the store and get another one. There's no way you're building a house when these are all the things that are in your mind. You need to have the tool chest rigged up, ready to go. You've tested every single one. You love the grip on every single tool that you've got. When you pull it out, you exact with precision. So
Yeah.
so maybe Monday and Tuesday, or the days where you don't feel like composing, are sound design days. Maybe that's the day where you sit with your guitar and you plug into your audio interface and you open up the 3 new guitar plugins that you just bought and you explore all of their parameters and you dial in the core sounds that you use. So I'll give you an example for me. Whenever I open up a guitar plugin or something, or I'm trying to, explore the bounds of what these things can do, I'm looking for balls to the wall rhythm sound where I can play riffs and I can, play with aggression and, that kind of stuff, rock and metal, of course, because that's the world that I live in. Then I'm going to see how delicate can I make it? Can I back the gain off a little bit? And does it react to my touch? Can I make it do sort of like maybe some more dynamic kind of half driven sounds? What happens if I add a little bit of reverb and delay? Ooh, yeah, that's my speed too. Let's save that. Okay, I need a pristine crystal clean. Let's see what I can do here. Let's dial that in. Nice, I like that. Reacts to all my pickups. Sounds good. Certainly usable. Okay, let's see if I can dial in a lead that sounds like something I can sing with, something I can solo with. Cool. All right, got that. Nice. That probably took like maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, maybe less, because gear is so good these days. That's not the mind frame that I'm composing in. That's like me sitting there just making sure it all feels good. Then on Tuesday, when I do have the itch to scratch and I'm like, yeah, I really want to compose, I'm so excited about all those new sounds I dialed in yesterday. You open up that template, they're ready to go, and you start making music, and you're not worried about if you like the way the hammer feels. You know the hammer feels good because you figured it out
Mm.
yesterday. Now you make the house.
Dude, that's pretty genius, man. I love that approach. Holy shit.
It's amazing. I mean, everyone wants everything today and now, and you're just not going to write your best piece of music today. It's just not going to happen. Or maybe it does, but you can't tell yourself you're going to, because you just simply won't. You need to let that happen and be impressed by your, your results as sort of like the byproduct of getting out of your own way and just flowing. So
Yeah.
you need to just create an environment in which it's easy. That's why you need to have a template built with all of your favorite sounds loaded up. Maybe you've got 4 of your favorite synth sounds that are already just locked and loaded. Your program bass sound is ready to go and it's dialed exactly how you like it. Your drum sound is pre-mixed and it's ready to go, so that when you start dropping MIDI in and you start dropping in that kick, snare, hi-hat groove, that feels banging, sounds good in the room. You're excited to grab your guitar. You can't wait to lay down something on top of it with tone you already know rock. You're not
Yeah.
spending your time wasting, So that's really important. And I picked this up from the EDM world because I'll look at how guys are, creating an entire song, and there's a lot going into that type of music. I mean,
Yeah.
people listen to the instrumental guitar music or rock and metal and they go, wow, so technical. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot less going on in here. It's the proficiency of the performance that's got you mystified. But when you stack it up against like a modern electronic production or something, the layers and the amount of signal flow and routing and the crazy trickery that's going on, it's
Yep.
nuts. It's a way different thing. And when you watch a guy open up a folder and immediately start grabbing samples, and samples are a whole other rabbit hole where, like, I was talking about dialing in tones for instruments, let alone curating all your favorite kick drums and
Yep.
hi-hats and claps and things like that. You could just lose your mind. You'll never make music unless you have like that A+++ folder that's filled with things you know you like to use, things that are malleable in a composition, where you can just grab that super sick kick drum that you're after and that super sick clap, and you're ready to go right away. So you might spend a couple days with a sample library just curating sounds, building some synth patches, doing whatever. And then when it comes time to make stuff, you dim the lights, you light a candle, maybe get a little inspired, however that works for you, and you get to making music with tools that you know work. So that's just made my life so much easier.
God damn, man, you are a fucking genius, dude. You're absolutely right when it comes to like, because I do a lot of work in the EDM world too, you're absolutely right when it comes to productions and when it comes to electronic music, even some pop music nowadays too. A lot of the
Yeah, man.
electrical stuff can get very overwhelming real fast, and now we're not even just talking about like samples and stuff, like everything else. There's so much going on, and you're right. I do believe that the best way to do it is to not necessarily force yourself. And here's the interesting part, not to like sidetrack so much, but in my experience, I've had the pleasure of getting to know and working with a lot of really cool songwriters and professionals. And one thing that I've learned from many of them, at least in the pop world, there is this sort of practice of you got to just write. You got to just write. And you may
Hmm.
not write a hit every single day, but every now and then you'll write a hit, whatever. But what's
That's
interesting,
that's a common concept
a
for
very
songwriters.
a
Yes,
very common
right.
concept.
You got to write the bad ones so you can ultimately write the good ones.
Exactly. But here's the interesting part that I'm relating to you is that there
Hmm.
are on rare occasions, not everybody, but on rare occasions, someone like me, for example, that I do multiple things, I do find that my brain, half the time it will wander, half the time it wants to create and like either music or something else. But I find that the days where I am not in the zone to create, there is this sort of struggle sometimes where like, oh shit, well, everybody else is creating, so I gotta create. But I also believe
Mm.
that through the trials and tribulations, I have learned to some extent, maybe not to the proficiency that you have, but to some extent, I've learned the importance of allowing yourself to kind of get to that mind space that if you're not there, maybe it's better to do something else rather than to force
Yes.
it. And I love that you are approaching your music in this way of like, all right, if I'm not in the mood to create today, then I'll at least prepare other things around it so that I'm ready when the day comes. And I love that you kind of have this confidence that you'll get that feeling, that little itch to scratch, and that you're just preparing yourself for when the itch actually comes. I guess I'm
Yes.
wondering how did you like embrace that? Because I feel like that is not something that is encouraged a lot amongst musicians and producers and songwriters a lot. You know what I mean?
Mm. Well, here's the thing, right? So it's funny we're having this conversation because I actually see myself as a constant work in progress when it comes to composition. And here's two things. One, I just finished a record. We're in the middle of promoting this record. It comes out this year. Obviously, this is a whole other topic, but what a strange year to be writing a record and
I
releasing
know,
a
right?
record.
Fuck.
But we're moving full steam ahead and it's going great. In fact, we've actually exceeded expectations. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that and why that's happening. But silver lining, and we're definitely taking it and running with it. So that's all good. I'd love to be going on tour in like a week or two, like I was supposed to, but that's a whole other thing. So here's the thing with me in composition. I feel like I'm constantly getting better, very slowly, and I think that if I had more time with no deadlines to explore writing and hone my craft, that I might actually be further along than I currently am. So next year we'll make a decade of intervals, and from the very first music that I ever released um, until recently, there has been zero cutting room floor material for intervals. So
Mm.
from 2011 until now, there has been literally not a song that I composed and then just like set aside and said, "Oh, we'll revisit this later," or maybe I'll revisit this one on the next record or whatever. Every last thing I've ever finished has been released.
Mm.
That's pretty crazy because I think the traditional approach for writing a record. A lot of bands, maybe not so much for this music, but for traditional music, they'll go into a studio, write 18 songs,
And
cut
then
it
pick
down
like
to the best,
10.
pick like 10 or 12, and then
Yeah.
that's the record, right? So the process of committing to everything, seeing it all the way through, I think that while that's like risky and some guys would like definitely not advise, I think it's healthy because I think that it constantly gives you room to do better than your last. And
Mm.
you've committed, you buttoned up that song, and you just you birthed it. It's just it's out there and there's no changing it. And in order to outdo that, you have to compose your next piece of work. So um, that's been really great for me. But deadlines are scary. So it's funny because this is the antithesis of option paralysis. I always feel like you know I need sort of that framework. I need limitation in some capacity. So you would think that having a deadline and something to work towards would be like, yeah, that's perfect. I'll have the record done and ready in this particular time frame. But when it's time to start writing a body of work, I need the calendar completely open. I need it completely wiped. Now, this doesn't work from a business standpoint because management, like 2 months into that, management's like, we have to book like the entire next cycle of touring. We need to start getting in the mix for things. I need you in the studio by this time so we can drop the record at this time. And then inevitably dates start rolling in. So um, this is the first time though, because we're on the cusp of dropping a record, and then who knows what the live music world is about to look like, where from the next foreseeable future, all I can think about is composing. All I can think about is literally just writing because there's nothing else that I can do. So now's the opportunity to stockpile things, and I could personally just have there's no boundaries. I can experiment and get weird and do things. And probably have some throwaway ideas and some things like that. And I can write all the bad songs so that I can continue writing better songs. But for me, I always feel like I'm not where I want to be in terms of songwriting. And I'll tell you why that is. This record we're promoting right now that's about to come out is the first music I've written since 2017 because
Ooh,
we tour like crazy.
yeah.
So when I come home from tour, if I'm in the midst of we did a 2.5 year touring cycle to which we played everywhere except for like South America and Russia. We literally did everything in between. So I, when am I writing? Because when I come home, I need to be a human being. And
Right.
I'm not the kind of guy that just goes from 6 weeks of international tour or whatever it is that I'm doing and goes straight into sitting in front of my desk with a guitar in my hands. Absolutely not. I need to
You have a life
recharge
to
my
live.
batteries.
You have a life to
Yes,
live. Yeah.
I need to be a person outside of the music, right? So during a touring cycle, I'm definitely doing a lot less of the spending time with the instrument and and composing and practicing and those types of things. I'm saving my energy and my attention and interest for those types of things for touring. So when I got started at the beginning of this year, I was at the NAMM show in January and I came home, and this is before the pandemic had unfolded and everything. Like we already consciously decided 2020 was going to be the year that I'd take to write a record, and we'd track it in the summer and it would come out in the fall and I'd be on tour by November. And we're still completely on course for that. My record comes out November 13th and I would be going on tour. But that's not the case.
Yeah.
So, I put my head down, and I'm in Canada, I'm in Toronto, and lockdown was like very real here. I can recall maybe 16 to 18 weeks of just pure
Jesus.
nothing. Like
God damn.
the only thing that was open was the grocery
Yeah.
store in the bank. No gym, which was
Nothing.
brutal
Nothing.
considering that's something that keeps my mental health sharp and gives me something to work towards outside of music. So no gym, no ability to see friends. I've seen essentially this year, apart from a couple of people, I've seen my girlfriend and my parents
Yeah.
for the
Same here.
entire year. I saw exactly, right. So I saw my touring family at NAMM and a lot of other people that I know from the road and the industry, and the year just went dark. And while that was like exciting at first because I was like, okay, yeah, there's really no deadlines now, I'm going to make a record and it's going to be great and I've got all this time, then that starts to play against you. And it was extremely challenging, and I definitely feel like I came out the other side with an extremely strong record. I actually believe that this is the most concise body of work that I'm releasing now for intervals. I'm really, really excited about this record, and the reception's been amazing so far. It feels really, really good. But I'm already hungry to continue writing. I'm like I said, I'm working on something now that's keeping the blade sharp, and I've got a little studio makeover that's about to happen. I usually do this between records, is I'll just flip my whole feng shui. I ordered a sit stand desk because I'm spending so much time at home. I need to be on my feet.
Dude,
So
those are
a convert
amazing. I love those things.
it's one that you can mount all your gear inside too. It's a music desk, so it's really, really sick, and I can't wait to just like kind of reinvigorate the recording space and change things up and vibe it all out and everything. And like that always gives me like a exciting sort of like renewed lease on things, and I'm just ready to start digging in and continuing. But right now I'm working on something that's keeping me sharp, and I'm also exploring sounds. Like I'm really going down the rabbit hole with synths, and they definitely played more of a integral role on the latest record. And I'm really getting into manipulating analog synths to support my ideas that I've composed first and foremost from the guitar, and then I embellish and create not just soundscapes, but also just like interactive, unison and harmony lines, and just more voices to add to the overall arsenal of sounds that I'm pulling from. So this is just like what we were talking about before. You spar in the dojo, you fight in the arena. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like you just spend the time when there's nothing that has explicit that has to be handled. You just no holds barred, just have some fun with it with zero outcome. Create sounds and just stash them away for when the time comes. And when inspiration does arrive, it's fickle, but it comes. Then you're ready to go, and you're not wasting your time going, I really wish that snare drum sounded better.
Yeah.
You're not concerned.
Yeah.
All you're concerned with is moving music down that sort of linear timeline, and not thinking about like, I wish this was better, I wish this was stronger, or I wish I had the money to buy this plugin, or this other one I have sucks. Like you can't get anything done like that. So yeah, I don't know, man. It's like a moving target. It's ever evolving. When I finish a record and I've like poured myself into it, I always go, wow, like how could I even imagine doing that again? And then a couple weeks goes by and you're like, yeah, no, I can certainly do better than that.
Yeah, dude,
So
I gotta say, man, it's interesting. First of all, I appreciate you being honest and very open. Second of all, I feel like this podcast has been pretty much just me picking your brain, and you've just been explaining so many things that I love. I love that you've been doing that. One of the cool things that I've noticed from you, as we kind of sort of start winding down here, but this is the interesting thing that
sure.
I like about who you are. And one of the reasons that I want to try and share this message with everybody, you seem very much, and again, I'm just assuming here based on what I'm gathering, based on our conversation, but you seem very much, content. You seem very confident. You seem very much kind of okay with a lot of things. And that's very broad in me saying, but I guess what I'm saying in my experience with talking with so many different kinds of people, everyone's different, yes, but I always feel like there is this vast difference between someone who is content and then someone who is still kind of unsure of a lot of things. And
Mm,
correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem very much like content and very sure in who you are. You may have goals that you're trying to reach. I think that's everybody. Everyone's trying to strive to be the best person they can be. But like for
hmm
example, you're okay with changing up, your studio whenever you're in between albums. You allow yourself to wait to create something when you're ready to do so. Like that's all stuff that I feel that comes with experience or comes with a lot of meditation or someone understanding who they are. Um,
hmm
and I guess I don't know. Part of me is curious how you find yourself being that way, because you definitely are. You have a very successful career. You're a very talented musician, but you're also very much like a good human being who's kind of content and kind of feng shui in that weird way. And I
mm,
find that combination rare. It's a very rare combination. And I guess for a lot of musicians out there, it's one of the things that I'm trying to help, spread that idea of like allowing yourself to be who you want to be and not stress out so much about all these bunch of other stuff that we're taught to
hmm
stress out about. So I guess my question for you is, have you always been that way, or did you kind of learn to be this way, if that makes sense?
mm. Certainly not always been this way, and I feel like I could be still, certainly better at being, more holistic or well-rounded. But things have changed in the last couple of years for me personally. Discovering mindfulness in general, and just becoming aware of these types of things, and practicing gratitude is
Right.
something that will change anybody. I don't care who you are. We all have something to be thankful for, and I think that that's a very powerful place to come from. And I think that mindset is the catalyst for change and for growth and for healing or resolving certain things that we might need to get past in order to become that better person.
Yeah.
Um, I think that early on, I probably resented, certain aspects of where things were at, or wish I could have more. I looked at, maybe people I knew that were getting going with their goals and music and things ahead of me, and I certainly did harbor some of that. And think that it's, um, I don't think that that's productive for your own goals, because it takes a lot of energy to be that person.
Yeah.
And how are you ever going to invest the energy, that same energy, into being a better version for you and for the people that matter in your life, for your loved ones and people that have to live with you on a day-to-day basis? Um, so with that being said, it's like, yeah, I have goals, I always want more than I have, but come on, man, like, how can I not be thankful for the fact that I've been my own boss since 2014? I eat, sleep, and breathe a musical identity that literally provides is a means to my end.
Yeah.
It's how I live this life. Um, on top of that, is a completely 100% solely independent entity. I employ 8 to 9 of my favorite people on the planet at any given moment when we're geared up and the machine is functioning as per usual when we're touring. Um, that would be 3 other members on stage, 4 to 5 crew members, and a bus driver, plus my manager and my business manager and my accountant and other various people that we work with. It's a symbiotic sort of ecosystem that is the means to my end, but is also the means to the end, an end for other individuals as well. And it's just part of their portfolio, but I get to be part of their lives, and provide them with opportunity, and conversely, they enrich what I do. So, like, how could you not be grateful for that? I wake up every day, and I have time to do the things that I need to, even outside of music, because I make my own hours, exploring these types of mental concepts like meditation and mindfulness and stuff. You need time. I don't, I certainly do empathize with people who need to spend time exploring these types of these facets of their psyche, but are have to go into the cubicle every day, or these days, heaven forbid, having to do something that's in the general public with the state of things going on now. Like, I
Right.
have nothing but respect and empathize for those individuals, because we could all use the time to heal and spend time working on ourselves every day, and take 2 hours to rehab injuries, and go to the gym, and sit with a book, and or meditate, or get your 10,000 steps, or have the
Right.
ability to curate the foods that you eat and nourish your body properly. Like, these are the things that I know that if I wasn't in the position that I was in now, I would be struggling to overcome a lot of things, and I might actually be a worse off version of myself. I know that some of those traits early on were there for me. I'm definitely prone to stress and anxiety, and that can bring out some things in me that I don't like. And mental health is so important. So I am extremely thankful every single day that I get to make music that fulfills many aspects of my life, and is therapy for me, and I can just keep being better to for myself and for everybody in my life. And well, what more do you want from this life? You know what I mean? So that's just how I feel, man. I don't know, like, may not have had that answer to that question a couple of years ago, but
But you do
I
now.
think there's a big, I do now, and it's a big year for reflection for everybody with what we're seeing going on. And I think that no matter where you're at right now, you certainly have something to be grateful for. And I think that overcoming anything that's troubling you, or that you need to get beyond, whether it's a mental scenario, or if it's a physical ailment, or any of these things, the number one thing that you learn when you get into discovering holistic approaches to healing anything that's troubling you, it starts with clearing space. And
Yeah.
the beginning of that is certainly rooted in gratitude. So,
Yeah. And by the way, when you say holistic approaches, are you talking about meditation or other things?
yeah, through meditation. I mean, here's the thing, like, just just the one's own psyche, and even things like breath work and things like that are actually the answer to a lot of the things that we being the proverbial human deal with on a day-to-day basis. But of course, I'm very nerdy and I get granular with these types of things, so I am
I
talking
love
about
those
making
things
sure
though,
you're,
dude.
yeah, like how you nourish your body and the foods that you eat, avoiding certain things, of course, and making sure that you're providing yourself with the raw materials that you need to heal and overcome these things. There's the mental work for sure, and the psychological work and physiological work, but then there's also the you need tools to build that house. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you better curate them right. We're not writing Paganini's Fifth Caprice fueled by McDonald's. So
True. Very
that's
true.
that's not the one. So and then of course there's definitely room for a whole other podcast with this stuff, because I will go down the rabbit hole, but I'm going to keep it short. But of course, there's other modalities like supplementing with the right things, and um, things like microdosing and things like that. I don't know how far left leaning your listener base is, but these types of things definitely have, are proven to quell depression and anxiety, and to actually clear that space and allow you to find the center again. And if you look at the album cover of my latest body of work, and you check out the title and everything, the record is called Circadian, and the song titles and everything. There is a lot of commentary and reflection in there
Yeah.
that I think will. Well, I mean, the cover art looks like something out of an anatomy textbook, so
Yep.
you guys can definitely see where my head's at.
No, and I love the cover art, dude. It looks really cool.
That was Colin from Circus Survive who painted
No
every
way.
panel. Yeah, yeah. Colin did the entire design concept for me for this record.
Damn. Shout out to
And
you, Colin. Jesus, that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, it's incredible. And the catalyst for a lot of this stuff, actually, I was already on to some of these things, but he and I had a discussion at the beginning of the year that ultimately led to me knowing that he was the one to help me explore those ideas and put this all together. But Colin is very much, if anyone's following him on Instagram or any of his socials and stuff, he's very open about discussing these types of things, and he's very, very much into a lot of what I was just describing. And I think that I'm a better human being having found some of those pathways to wander down myself. So
I get,
how could you begrudge any of these opportunities that we're given? I literally get to hang out on a podcast with you and have a really cerebral discussion about music and everything that's going on right now at a very strange time for human beings in general. But I'm so thankful just to be in a place where I get to create and live a life that I'm happy with. And the only way you get more is by being content with what you have. So
yeah. I gotta say, man, I love that. And there's, if you're down for it, we gotta get you back on the show to actually just talk about all this bunch of random stuff, because that stuff I'm very interested in. And not to
for sure.
not to sidetrack too much, because I do feel like I've taken too much of your time at this point. But
No, it's all good, man.
I mean, like here's the reality. To me, one of my biggest passions, and by the way, you're right. I think gratitude is one of those things that really it's a key to making big changes. And for me, one of the keys was like meditation, which I started doing about like 2 years ago or so.
Huge.
That's kind of been like a pathway to other different things. And I know it sounds cliche, people being in the right state of mind and blah blah blah, but to me it's been night and day. Like, I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago. And that's
Of course
something
not.
that happens like in your late 20s and early 30s, that you start kind of becoming the same person. But to say that 2 years ago I made a drastic change is a big deal for me. And I do my best to try and share that with others. To me, it doesn't really matter what people do. Honestly, Aaron, like, it doesn't really matter what you do. All that matters to me is that you're happy, that you're content,
Hmm.
and that you're living a life like you are, for example, where there's not so much pressure to becoming or doing stuff. It's just like doing it when you're ready, preparing and living this balanced life. I think that is honestly the keys for a lot of artists, because we are brought up in a kind of turmoil kind of mindset. At least that was my experience, and I
Hmm.
I feel like I've spent my life correcting a lot of those things. Not necessarily what I learned, but the mindset behind it. And now that I'm happier where I'm at, I think it's part of my job and everyone's job to like help others not only get better at music and push for their career, but to also find that balance in their life, because that's important. It doesn't matter if you have a successful career if your life is just imbalanced. all of it needs to be kind of in that place, which again, I feel like you have found and you're perfecting every day. And it's important. And I think your fans and everybody else, I think it's cool that they're going to find out that you are living this very grateful life, that you're very insightful, that your creativity is very direct and very intentful. I don't know. I'm very much leaving this conversation super inspired and I admire you quite a bit, dude. So I really do appreciate your honesty. And it's just so fucking cool to learn about your life, man. It's amazing.
Thanks, man. Well, I definitely appreciate that, and I think that sometimes these conversations, they run the risk of a couple things. Like one, by no means am I like a guru when it comes to meditation. I'm actually quite poor at my practice at the best of times, finding time to do it or being consistent with it. I do make the time for it. It's not necessarily the one thing that's changed me for the better, but being aware of the concept and how that practice spills over into your day-to-day life, even just that alone is enough to almost provide some sort of like CBT, or for those who don't know what that stands for, it's cognitive behavioral therapy, where
Yeah.
it allows you to just like examine a moment in time, and perhaps like it's something that would stress you out, stress the old you out, and now there's like a gap between you and that moment. It's almost like that's the scenes in Saved by the Bell where you just like freeze everything in the room and you can run around and make some decisions and then like hit play again.
Yeah. Yeah.
The further you are from stress and the more resilience from the stress that you build up, the easier it is for you to actually sort of wade through some of those things. One of the biggest things for me for that actually, in my journey with like discovering like biohacking and like trying to be healthier and stuff, was cold exposure. You can certainly do that just with a cold shower. I know people are like, wait, what, where did that come from? But that's, I actually implore that that's the first place to build that resilience to stress. And physical hormetic stress is perceived by the nervous system and the body as the exact same thing as an emotional threat or any other sort of like checking your bank balance and being like, wait, what? I don't have as much money as I thought I did. Or your girlfriend says this, it sets you off. I actually, I actually am wholeheartedly imploring everybody to, and if it's not cold exposure, if you have access to a sauna, that would be another one. Um, uh, or an intense physical workout, cardio. These are the things that actually make you a stronger and more resilient individual in how you deal with and cope with your issues.
Yeah.
I know that sounds crazy, but these things don't happen in a psychologist or a shrink's office.
They don't.
They happen because you build resilience to these things. Um, Cold exposure being that was the ticket for me, because I was practicing other things, but um, when you combine that approach, when you set an intention and you spend 2 minutes in sub-zero water, I'm talking about ice, like in an ice bath up
Yeah.
to your neck, and yes, you can practice with a cold shower. You can start by doing 10 seconds today and 20 seconds tomorrow and 30 seconds. Some people absolutely hate it. They go, I can't do it. There's no way. Well, this is the issue. This is the issue here. And I'm not telling you you need to experience pain to be able to deal with your problems better, but there is a threshold that you must transverse,
Yeah.
in order to be able to develop that sort of that buffer between how we perceive. And your nervous system will thank you. Your body will thank you. You will heal and resolve the things that you need to get over much, much quicker than sort of just procrastinating and keeping yourself warm on the couch. We need that little bit of exposure. The body adapts to hormetic stress. Think about it. How else do you build a body? We go into the gym and you tear down muscle so you can fall asleep and build it back better than it was yesterday. That's the
Exactly.
entire concept. You need to experience these things emotionally. You need to confront things. You don't get to just wear mittens and a helmet for your whole life.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
so that's where I changed over the last couple of years. And
Really.
it's evident in my music. It's evident in like the people that live their day-to-day life with me. Like I remember my parents taking sort of notice of like how I've, just calmer demeanor. Like, wow, are you okay? You're like a lot more like kind of seeming different about some stuff. Well, I'm not manic. I'm actually just a balanced version of me. This is how I should be,
Yeah.
not the me that before, who was fly off the handle and knee jerk. response to things that he doesn't like. That's not how we're supposed to be at all. And your body won't thank you for it either. You need to be able
Exactly.
to handle these types of things, right? So, and I mean, dude, it is a rabbit hole for sure. Like I'm reading a book right now called "This Is Your Brain on Food," and it's a fascinating book about the how wrong the allopathic medical industry is for the knee jerk response to just prescribing you know any pharmaceutical under the sun to just combat symptoms that we know for sure are just driven from nutrition. Like
Yeah.
when a child has ADHD, maybe you should stop feeding it McDonald's exclusively. Maybe that's
Mm.
the answer, and maybe it has nothing to do with the fact that you think there's just something wrong with your kid's brain. Um, there's so much science to prove that the stomach is the second brain in the body. In fact, it might even be the first brain.
Yeah.
And the
That I can
vagal nerve,
believe.
yes, 100%. Where do you feel fear before the stage or when the
Stomach.
elevator
It's all in
drops?
the
In
gut.
your stomach.
It's all in the
You feel it
gut.
in your stomach.
Yeah.
So anyone who wants to argue with me on that is you're not gonna win that one. So um so yeah, building strong vagal tone, being able to confront stress and not feel the elevator drop, not
Yeah.
feel butterflies. This is the difference between somebody with a toned autonomic nervous system that's just capable of staring fear in the face and not letting it literally destroy them from the inside out. And this is how we thwart disease. This is how we live longer. This is how we age in reverse,
Yeah.
actually. This is how we make better art, everything. So,
It all depends on that. The right mind. Oh man, you're right. This is a rabbit hole that can literally go on for
oh,
hours.
we could go way too far. So we'll have to cut it at some point. But these are
Yeah.
the things that fascinate me. The album is called Circadian. You were talking about that pursuit of balance. I've often used, and I know it might be lame, but my zodiac sign is the Libra scales, and
Nice.
there's a tune 2 records back called Libra, and on my last record, I physically incorporated the scales into the album design.
I'm a
This
Scorpio,
is
by the way.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, maybe we have some sort of compatibility. I don't know. I'd have to look into
I
that.
know.
So anyhow, for me, it's been like a constant theme in the music, and that pursuit of balance is something that I'm constantly using metaphor with song titles and album titles and everything to sort of depict that. And circadian for me was like the perfect metaphor for realigning yourself with the environment that produced us. So that circadian rhythm is our relationship to the sun up and the moon down, and and the farmer's almanac, and how human beings are supposed to live their life on this planet. And it's like
Yeah.
there's a lot of allusions to various things, like if you look at the song titles, there's like a couple of references to some neurotransmitters and some brain health stuff. The finale is called Earthing, which is the sort of the concept of taking your shoes off and putting your feet right into the soil or right into the sand, standing in the grass.
Yeah.
These are basic things that we don't do anymore.
Yeah.
Humans don't do this is how disconnected we are. So circadian for me, in that like rhythmic sort of cycle, is my like Libra 2.0. It's like that's like circadian, being aligned with the sun and the moon and everything that gives us life, is like is that metaphor for the pursuit of balance.
Yeah. What's interesting, kind of branching up on what you said, and you're right, we're gonna have to cut this at some point. But like
Oh yeah.
the idea is like when I before I even ever explored like mindfulness or spirituality or whatever you want to call it, I had this common misconception that like a lot of these things, whether it was meditation or other methods, that it was just I was too biased about them. And when I started to learn, thanks to a good friend of mine, who's a brilliant astrologer and very gifted in that realm, very slowly helped me realize that a lot of these things that are starting to kind of become popular now, they're not meant to be manuals. They're not meant to be like one and done. They're really just possibilities of what you could potentially do. And she helped me understand that, like, for example, me being a Scorpio, there's many different ways that I could use who I am at my core. That doesn't mean that I'm always going to be that way, or that just because, a certain definition for Scorpio is this, it doesn't mean it's me. There's a lot of intricacies, but the idea is
Hmm.
that you use all these methods and knowledge to really dig deep and find out who you are for yourself. And then when you kind of go through that process, whether it's through the cold, what did you call it again? The cold process or the
cold exposure.
Exactly. I haven't tried it, but I've seen it and it looks dope. But the idea is that there's dozens, if not hundreds of methods to go deep and explore your mind. And the idea is to find one that works for you and confront yourself, like confront your fears, confront your mistakes, confront the positives, the bads, and be at peace with it. And you find that once you find that peace, as cliche as that sounds, those that find that peace, whether they're hugely successful or mildly successful or whatever, tend to live very healthy and happy lives. And as musicians, as we kind of push forward this career, this desire that we want to make this a career, it's vital to be at one with yourself, to be at peace, so that once you reach that success, once you're on stage or doing whatever it is you want to do, you're not questioning any of it. You're just, what it is, you confront your fears, and it doesn't seem that big of a deal anymore. Anyways, I'm rambling. It's that rabbit hole we're talking about, man.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's all good stuff. And I'm hoping that, for your viewers, that your listeners that made it this far, that this is stuff that, they hopefully gain some perspective on, and not that I don't ever like to come off as like the authority with these things, because by no means, I listen to a lot of podcasts on the subject or these various subjects from professionals, and there is a world of a wealth of knowledge that I'm not even close to grasping.
Yeah.
But I think that just being the messenger sometimes, and showing people that solving the issues that are troubling you isn't necessarily what we've been taught. It isn't just a trip to the doctor for the bottle of pills or whatever. It's you need to really just kind of scale it back, and you need to take a look at, there's so many factors, like, nobody thinks about the food they put in their body.
Yeah.
And like that's just like number one. Everyone thinks the answer is, I need to have less, I need to eat less and exercise more. I mean, sure. But like, even the concept of eating less isn't necessarily the answer, because there's a science to this. If you're 6'6" and you think the answer is eating the same way your girlfriend is eating or something so you can lose weight, no, that's not how your body works. Maybe you need to do a little homework and figure out that you actually get to eat all the foods that you want, and perhaps you're not losing weight because you're not eating enough.
Yeah,
that's some crazy stuff right
your
there.
Body adapts. Your body adapts.
Yes. You need to figure out what it is that you need, and you need to just stop looking for the easy answers, which is just the quick fix for this, or giving up on this, or I have depression and anxiety, so I need somebody to tell me how to feel and give me a bottle of pills. Absolutely not. The answer is in the food and the water, and you need to just take the time to figure out how to feel this gratitude that you and I are both describing. And trust me, I couldn't have had this conversation with you 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just, somewhere along the journey myself, but I'm just like most people. I need results. Seeing is believing. And when I see something, a lot of the time my obsession will just catch on like a house on fire. So this is what's been working for me. I not only feel better tangibly within my own life, but people that have to live with me have also expressed that it's, you're a different person. You're not that the old one was worse or you're better now, but there are certainly traits that are admirable or desirable to be around. And, that flow outwards affects the flow you get inwards. So, pretty woo stuff. Hopefully people dig that. That's a good solid 2-hour podcast.
God damn. Holy shit, Mr. Aaron Marshall. Goddamn intervals. You're a genius, dude. I love talking to you. You're really insightful. And, what else is there left to? I mean, there's so much that's left to say, but I think this is a good place to end it until we have a part 2 in the near future, because we definitely need to have a part 2, man. This has been great.
Yeah, dude, let's get caught up another time for sure. And if anybody made it this far, thanks for listening. Also, thank you for your time, Eddie. Appreciate that. And definitely going to take the opportunity right now, because my manager would probably shoot me if I didn't. I have a record. It's coming out November 13th.
Yes, actually, please do.
Streaming. Yes, there are 2 singles that are streaming right now. You can go to Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere that you consume music. If you're a Bandcamp person, we do that too. You can literally find it everywhere. The first single is called 5-HTP, and the second single is called Lock and Key. They're both out, and you can check them out now. The record comes out November 13th, and if you go to sheethappenspublishing.com and you go to the intervals section, I've got vinyl variants. Ooh. We've got deluxe guitar tab bundle books that come with jam tracks with all my parts muted, so you can jam along, make your own cover videos, and you can do all the things that you want to do, whether it's just learning the songs and jamming in your room and you don't have to listen to my nonsense in the way. We've created detailed mixes with my parts muted for you guys, so you can learn everything from the book that's tabbed and curated by myself and their in-house transcriber. And then, of course, CDs, cloth, my favorite merch items of all time. We've done masks, we've done dice, so you can gamble at home responsibly within your social bubble, because we're in a pandemic, people. We're in a pandemic. Yep. Okay. No, I didn't say go gamble in an alleyway somewhere. I said gamble with mom and dad. Okay, it's different.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome.
But anyway, there's a bunch of fun stuff. Sheethappenspublishing.com. Click the intervals part. We're doing giveaways right now. If you pre-order the record before November 13th, there's 2 more giveaways. So you guys are coming a little late with this, but there's 2 more giveaways. I don't know when your podcast is coming out, but you guys can get involved and win some sweet stuff. Record comes out November 13th. Please stream it, show a friend, and I'll see you guys on the road when it's safe to do so.
Goddamn, dude. Thank you so much for being on the show. You're fantastic.
All right. No problem, Eddie. Appreciate you having me on, dude. It was a great hang.